Okay, welcome. Stephanie and I are going to talk a little bit about some of the ways AI could be used to complement student learning. We hear a lot from faculty who are concerned about all the ways that students can use AI tools to support academic dishonesty and academic integrity violations. But there's a long history where anything new is coming on, where people sometimes tend to react to it negatively. Or actually, whenever there's a new ed tech innovation, there are some people who see it's going to revolutionize education and create all sorts of new possibilities to allow students to learn more efficiently. But there's also a lot of people who say this is going to be a source of ruin for students and learning will stop. So if you want a copy of these slides, you can just scan that QR code or type in that tiny URL. It'll ask you if you want to make a copy of it, and it will put it right in your Google Drive. We didn't put any viruses in it or anything, so it is safe to open it, as anyone who created a virus would say. But really, they're just Google Slides. Okay, and for those people online, you can either scan it or just type that in. Everyone get that? Okay, so I mentioned that there were some barriers that people have seen to learning along the way, and some of them go way back. Plato in the Phaedrus had this little quote. He was really concerned that the use of writing would eliminate people's possibility to remember things, that students would no longer have those mental skills and would impair their ability to learn, because now you could write things down and you don't have to remember them. We've seen similar things. Some of you may remember times when electronic calculators were introduced, and all the math faculty out there, or many math faculty, were saying, I was in high school at the time, how will students ever learn how to do square roots by hand if they have electronic calculators? And it's true. Very few people are taught how to compute square roots by hand because you don't need to. We have tools to do that. And it allows people to go quite a bit further because they're not wasting time trying to learn how to do things that can easily be done by machines so that you can focus on higher level things. Computers have had similar concerns at times. Spell check was also something I remember when I first started teaching at Oswego. There was a lot of debate among the English faculty about whether students should be allowed to do spell check, because how would they learn how to write effectively if they don't know how to spell? It really still bothers me when I see students who turn in things with misspelled words, or perhaps auto-corrected words to words that weren't quite what they meant to say. But, I don't think many people would argue that spell check is a tool that's going to ruin our youth in some way. And I wish many more students would use it. The internet, most of you probably remember when there was a lot of disagreement about how the internet would affect student learning. Digital documents is a source of concern right now. We're still, a lot of people are arguing, you can only learn if you have things on paper. You can't learn as well from digital materials. And there is some evidence that you can remember things more when they're in books and things than in digital documents. But, there's a lot of advantages having digital accessibility and other things that you don't have with written text. And in general, these are all tools that were objected to at the time when they were first introduced. But I think we've come to adapt to them pretty well. And in general, when there's changes like this, it sometimes does cause changes in how we teach and also how students learn. But generally, it allows us to learn a bit more and to go further, because we're not doing the basic level things that these supportive tools have allowed us to do. And we're seeing a lot of the same arguments about AI right now, that they're going to ruin the ability of students to learn, and it's just going to result in a lot of students cheating, which we should probably address that issue now. And many students do engage in cheating. In general, there was a survey last fall, I think it was October and November, that 60 to 70% of high school students have engaged in at least one cheating behavior each month. But the interesting thing is that had been true since about 2020 or so. There was a bit of an upswing in the amount of academic integrity violations back during the pandemic, but it hasn't gotten worse with AI. What seems to have happened is that the amount of academic integrity issue has switched a bit. Chegg's share price just in the first 5 months of this year, from January through I think about 3 weeks ago, its price has fallen by 50%. And last year it fell by, I think, 25 or 30% as well. I forgot the exact amount. So it's changed quite a bit. And in response to that, people concerned about academic integrity have relied on AI detection. And the best estimate of how effective this could be is from Turnitin, one of the sponsors I think of here, or one of the vendors here. And they boast a 98% accuracy rate in detecting ChatGPT generated content. And other testing indicates that that is fairly accurate when people are using GPT-3 or GPT 3.5 with relatively simple prompts with not a lot of modification or a lot of adaptation. Or at least when native English speakers use it. It turns out it may not work quite as well in other cases. In general, we know that accuracy declines when people modify their prompts, when they ask it to change the voice a bit, or when they run it through a paraphrase tool or something similar after it was generated by AI tools. And one problem, though, with any AI detection software is that most of them were based on output. The training database for them were things produced by ChatGPT 3 or earlier. Now the free version of ChatGPT is 3.5. 4.0 is going to be released that way for the general public soon. 4.0 Omni hasn't really been tested so well with that. And other AI databases, things like Claude, tend to be a little bit less detected by most of the detection tools, especially the current version of Claude and the current version of ChatGPT appear to be generating somewhat more personalized responses that are not quite as formalistic, which makes it potentially, at least, a little bit harder to detect the AI. And an interesting thing is the newer models in particular can be given training on student writing. So they can submit samples of their own writing, or faculty can submit samples of their own writing. And then ChatGPT 4.0 Omni, the current release that came out a couple of weeks ago, I think now, can generate writing that's virtually indistinguishable from the student's own writing style or from faculty members' own writing style. You could feed it a whole bunch of letters of recommendation for students, describe the type of student, and it will generate something that sounds remarkably like something you might write, which suggests, at least potentially, there hasn't been any testing that I've seen on this, that it may be a bit harder to detect some of that. But there are some issues in terms of detection. I mentioned that AI does pretty well with native speakers, but it may not work quite as well in other cases.
All right. Switch. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about AI detection tools and non-native speakers and some of the problems that come along with these tools when we're looking at any writer who is writing in a language that is not their first. So I rely on this paper pretty heavily in this slide. And if you haven't checked this one out, I would highly recommend it. It's the title of the paper is something like, like why AI detection tools are problematic, but we'll share the slides with you. The link is clickable. It will take you right to it. This was a 2023 study that showed that the detectors consistently misclassify non-native English writing samples as AI generated, whereas native writing samples were accurately identified. So we're going to just look at how the study was conducted, because I think that's important. The study looked at 7 popular detection tools, looked at 91 TOEFL examinations, and the acronym is written out there. It's a test of English as a foreign language essays that were written or from a Chinese forum, and then 88 8th grade essays that were written by US students. So those were the 2 groups that were sort of measured against the 7 different detection tool softwares. So the detection tools accurately identified the essays written by US students, but labeled more than half, oh, I forgot to fix that typo, 61.3% of the TOEFL essays, so significantly more than half, claimed that they were generated by AI when they were not, in fact. So this is a pretty problematic thing. If you go into the study a little bit more, one of the biggest reasons that the essays were sort of misidentified is that English language learners tend to not use a lot of adverbs and adjectives when they write. Their writing tends to be a little bit more straightforward, and sometimes follows patterns, right? Which is how these large language models function, right? They write in patterns, they produce patterns. So that's one of the biggest reasons why these essays were being sort of flagged this way, when in fact they were written all by humans, right? And this is a really problematic thing if you are relying only on these tools to sort of detect whether or not students are using them. In fact, I have a friend who tends to write in like this very straightforward way, and she has put her own writing into the tools, and you know, like something like an essay she's written, and an AI tool, detection tool has said this is like 95% generated by AI, and she's like, actually no, 0 of it has been generated by AI. So it is, you know, it is a problematic thing. So I'm going to talk for just a little bit about how this is kind of like a twofold problem, right? If we think about it like a problem. So what I did last fall when, you know, like I had had a little bit of time to start wrapping my head around the AI tools and the changes that I had started to see in my students, I decided that in my composition classroom, because I teach writing, I wanted to really think about the kinds of assignments that I was designing and giving my students. Like we talked about kind of in a few sessions today, thinking about the assignments that we give are important, right? Because if our students perceive the work as just busy work or, you know, like not worth my time or whatever, then they are perhaps more likely to lean on these tools to help them or produce work for them. So for me, right, and lots of other writing teachers that I know, we all sort of were like low-key panicking about, you know, like what this meant for the writing classroom. So I decided to go through and redesign a couple of the assignments that I was already doing in light of this. So something that I had kind of done a lot already was scaffold the writing assignments in my classes. I believe that this is a pretty important thing for writing, right? And remember, everything I'm going to say is from that writing teacher perspective, so bear with me. But for me, having my students go through multiple renditions of something was very, very helpful. Having them go through a project in pieces, I found to be more manageable for me because I could slow things down a lot, right? And really focus on critical thinking and developing an analysis or a train of thought or a perspective with them. But it would also give me the opportunity to kind of go with them as they figured it out, right? So for a lot of composition students, they're usually freshmen, right? This is a class that a lot of first-year students are taking. And as you all know, writing in college is significantly different from writing in high school and writing in other kinds of school, especially given everything that we've kind of gone through the last several years with the pandemic and online learning and things like that. Felt like I had to make these adjustments. So I was already doing scaffolded writing assignments, but I decided to integrate some AI components to those assignments to like see what would happen, basically. So English 102 is English composition. That's what we call it at SUNY Oswego. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing because it's long, and I'm happy to talk with people, you know, more about how this works if you're interested. But basically, I had a semester-long research assignment that I did in this class, and the assignment was broken down into 4 different parts. So the first part, I had my students write very generally about the topic that they were thinking about choosing for the assignment. There was no research. All the information was coming from their own brain. I made it super casual, very informal. They had to write like 1 double-spaced page, right? So it was like very basic. Second part, they had to create an annotated bibliography with a number of trustworthy, credible sources. Third part was a draft of their essay that was more like about 75% complete. Last part was the final essay where like they cleaned things up and made everything really beautiful. They got a ton of feedback from me on every single part of this assignment, right? In addition to feedback from me, they also got feedback from their peers during in-class workshop assignments, and then they could choose to integrate AI if they wanted to. So for every part of this, I also made a required process paper for my students to complete. If they chose to use AI to help them complete this assignment, then in their reflective process paper, they would talk about how they integrated the tool. So I think like if you were in David Wiley's talk, like having like a transcript, right, where you could look at the exchange between the student and the AI, right? Like I would have them include that. So like for part one, where they were just kind of casually talking to me about their topic, we did some activities in class where I led them through brainstorming activities with ChatGPT, because that was the one that everybody was really talking about, right? For part two, I had them look at samples of other annotated bibliographies that ChatGPT generated. And we could like talk about like what the AI tool did well, what it did not so well. I also had them use ChatGPT to look for sources, and that led to a really fascinating conversation because last year, at that time, ChatGPT was mostly making everything up. So that was like a really wonderful moment for them because they kind of started to realize that while this tool was really interesting and kind of fun, it wasn't always right. For part three, for the draft of their essay, I had the AI tools help them draft outlines, which we then looked at and compared to what they were doing in class. We did some really fun reverse outlining activities. And then for the last part, when they were cleaning up their paper, I had the AI tools help them with like citation if they chose that, right? Like we compared what ChatGPT generated versus, like some of the other citation generators that are pretty popular, like Zotero and et cetera. So in each of the process papers, they reflected on what it was like to do the assignment and then, if they incorporated generative AI or not, and like why they made the choices that they did. The interesting change that I made in regard to grading is that these 4 parts of the scaffolded research paper, before I changed things and integrated AI, were about 40% of their overall grade in my class. It was huge, really significant. When I kind of looked back and started redesigning some things, I knocked down the 4 parts, the scaffolded research paper, from 40% to 25%. And then I made the 4 process papers equivalent in the grading. The process papers were graded based on completion only. So I said, do it, reflect, think about what you're doing, think about what you're learning and how you completed this assignment. I made it super low stakes, right? I was like, if you do this and it's thoughtful and it's interesting and you're honest, then I will give you a 100. And most of them were all over that. It was really fascinating that when I gave them a choice about using the AI tools and reflecting, some of them in class, actually a large number in the fall semester, were very resistant to using the AI tools at all. They were like, Stephanie, I don't want to do this. Can we do something else? I want to do what my high school English teacher taught me how to do. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, go ahead, do what, you don't want to use the tools, then don't use them, right? You should do what feels good for you. The other half was more like, yeah, like, let's check this out. In the spring semester, instead of about half, it was more like 75% of them were really gung-ho and 25% were more resistant. So that was fascinating also. But it was more trying to shift the focus to, okay, like, you have to think critically and analytically, right? And like, it's important for you as a college student at this time to know how to write a research paper and how to pull something together and how to have your own voice and say something, right? But it's also really important for you to describe to me why you did what you did and what your motivation was for doing that. Okay, and then my last 2 things really quick, and I'm not going to click on these right now. But you can click on them later. You have the slides. I also started doing fishbowl assignments from AQ. I don't know, has anybody in here taken any AQ courses? They're really wonderful. So one of the assignments that you can do in an AQ course is something that's called a fishbowl. You, the instructor, give a reading assignment to your class. Everybody reads it. And then the day of class, when you're going to talk about the reading, a handful of students get like randomly chosen to be in the fishbowl. So they sit and talk about the reading assignment while everybody else listens. So one of the things that I started doing, and I've been doing fishbowls for several years now, I started choosing pieces of writing that were related to generative AI tools and technology, right? So that in addition to like me talking, they also got to read about it and talk about it amongst each other. And those discussions were really amazing because, you know, they had these varied perspectives. Some of them were super gung-ho. Some of them were like, oh, I really don't know about this. And I made sure to choose examples that were varied. So for example, one of them was about OpenAI and the lawsuit with the New York Times, right? So that gave us a really wonderful opportunity to talk about copyright considerations, et cetera. So all of those things I think are helpful as we're educating our students to use these tools and think about what it means. Okay, I think that's good.
Okay, so one of the ways of doing this is, as Stephanie said, having students learn how to use AI tools effectively. And I've done the same thing with scaffolded projects. In fact, I had students write a book this semester in a capstone course using a very similar process. You know, but there's a few other things we can do. And one of the classes I teach is a class of normally 300 to 400 students every fall semester in an introductory economics course. And they don't do quite as much writing in the same form because it would be a bit of work to be able to evaluate all that. So I use more standardized instruments. But, you know, one of the things that happens is that students coming in, especially since a pandemic, coming into my freshman class with a lot weaker background in terms of their math skills, their ability to analyze graphs and just interpret numeric data and interpret the types of things we do in introductory economics. But, you know, it's a much higher variance in their abilities and a much wider variance in terms of what they come in knowing, depending on what schools they went with, what sort of background they had and so forth. And I provide a lot of support materials for the students. I use a Waymaker learning pack, the Waymaker package, which is a personalized learning platform that has lots of support, lots of infinite practice on things until they master the concept. And it's all color-coded to show you whether they've mastered things and so forth. Adaptive learning platforms work the same way. But students always get stuck on some things. And I created some videos that I've created, that I put in the course that are optional. Some of them are optional, some are not. But there's embedded questions. They can take those as many times as they want until they master them and only the highest grade is kept. But even then, students are getting stuck sometimes on things I don't anticipate them getting stuck on, especially when you've got 400 students. You can't anticipate where students may have trouble understanding some things. And one of the things I suggested to the students this past fall is that they use AI to create personal tutorials for themselves. You know, it never gets tired of explaining things. It never gets tired of quizzing students on things. And, you know, you can just basically, let them do unlimited retrieval practice until they master the materials. And you can use fairly simple prompts. And this is like a generic form of a prompt where you can, pretty much any discipline, you could give a prompt to, I would recommend Claude over the free version of ChatGPT. It's actually much less productive now. The free version of ChatGPT now, 3.5, is much worse than it was 6 months or a year ago. They've optimized it a little bit and it has many more errors and it doesn't actually follow the prompts as well as it used to. But the 4.0 version, the paid one, is dramatically better. And Claude, the free version of Claude, is actually much better than the free version of ChatGPT. And in fact, the free version of Claude is pretty close to, not quite, but pretty close to ChatGPT 4.4 Omni. So just ask, when students get stuck on something, send prompt saying, I'm stuck on this, I'm in this course. So it prompts the AI tool what level the student is and what type of tutorial material might be appropriate. It asks to provide a sequence of review materials and check your understanding by asking questions at each stage and providing feedback on it. So when students are getting things wrong, it gives them feedback. And you know, you can encourage students, if they still don't get it, to ask for more feedback or more basic level explanation. And it's a really wonderful tool. Now, one problem is the students who are most likely to use this are generally the students who tend to do better anyway, but one thing you could always do is you could perhaps have, some extra credit or assign some points to this so that they submit copies of their work and show how they've worked for it, or submit reflections on this periodically, just to incentivize it, because students will work really hard for very low percentages on the grade book, or for extra credit and so forth. And just providing a small incentive could be really helpful. Carol Twigg, who ran the National Center for Academic Transformation, had a slogan that freshmen don't do optional. And there's a lot of evidence for that, unless they're really engaged in it. But those are not the students who tend to struggle, but by giving a small incentive, it can really help get students doing some of these things. And now we have some sample student assignments here. If you downloaded this, you can click on that, I think, and it will take you there. And let's go to that page. And I think I provided 2 of these and Stephanie provided 2. The first 2 are mine. And we'd encourage you to try one of these or make up your own version of this and just see how it works. You can copy them down exactly, but the first one is to debate on a topic in any discipline and have students debate with this and submit in a copy of their debate. Or the second one, and this is a really fun assignment that students tend to like, ask an AI, a large language model, to play in the role of some famous contributor to your discipline, and have the students do an interview with them. And it could be an interview about current policy topics, which can be a little bit fun, so students can make connections between what they're learning and issues that are being currently debated. And would you like to talk about the next
Sure.
two?
Yep.
And we'd encourage you just to try some of these while we chatter on here.
So the third example is one that I've done in class a few times, and it's always a fun experiment to see what happens. Like John mentioned, the free version of ChatGPT, and actually it just upgraded me to the 4.0 like earlier today. So the free version made kind of like more interesting results with this one. But I had my students in class prompt the AI, say I'm a high school student applying to a SUNY school of your choice. I had them leave it open, right? Because it's really fascinating to see like what the AI tools will choose. I don't know, I'm tickled by that. So anyway, like leave it open, write a college admissions essay that outlines your qualifications and your interests. Then what I had them do was ask ChatGPT to ask as a high school student applying to Harvard or some other Ivy League institution. Same thing, write a college admissions essay, right? Sort of outlining why you are a good fit for this school. Then I had them compare and analyze the results of the 2 essays. And let me tell you, they were different. And it was really fascinating, right? For my students to have the opportunity to say, well, like, I don't sound like that, like, who is this student? Why does this student at the Ivy League school have these qualifications, and what assumptions are being made, right, about these 2 different people? And then another one that I do in class is to ask ChatGPT, act as a college student enrolled in an English class, you need help starting a writing assignment. I have it give a very basic summary of what the writing assignment is, which is important, right, for help. And then this is one of my favorite ways to use these tools, and for me to have my students learn and brainstorm with them. So ask the AI tool, please ask one question at a time. Give me the opportunity to respond to each question in this brainstorming exercise. And the goal of the exercise is for me to pick a topic with a specific focus for my analytical paper. So it's a really nice kind of back and forth, because, like the AI tool will ask you a question and then you can respond, and then it will ask you another question and you can respond, and kind of keep going that way. So what John and I are going to ask you to do over the next, what do you think, 5 minutes?
5 to 8 minutes, let's say.
Over the next 5 to 8 minutes.
Try doing one of these. And
pick one of these and either use ChatGPT or Claude, whatever your choice is, and input some version of one of these prompts in and kind of play around with it and see what happens. And then we would love to hear like what your results are.
Sure.
And I also can put. This is shared with everybody, right, John?
Yeah, I shared the slides, so
Okay,
the link's in the slide, so.
okay.
Oh, yeah, let's get this out of the way, and it would be, right at the very beginning, let's see. There.
Maybe about 2 more minutes will get us to 8 minutes. That's good.
Okay, so did you find anything interesting? Was it somewhat fun to try some of these things? You know, and making learning fun isn't the worst thing in the world. Or as in Stephanie was suggesting, having students reflect on their learning, improving their metacognition is not bad. You know, but to do these things, well, for example, in mine, in order to be able to interview someone from history about current events, you need to know something about those current events and you need to know something about the philosophy. But it's a much more fun way of engaging with this than just turning in a paper, particularly an AI generated paper. And, you know, you're evaluating students not so much on the responses, but by what they're asking, by the knowledge they demonstrate through the process of the interview, for example.
Yep. Yeah. Rachel, did you have your hand up?
I thought you were asking.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was really curious about the ones that we shared about, the Disney versus Harvard letter. So I tried that one and I was able to try it on, you know, they're letting me use for now or a women's bookstore in free text and case. So they were quite similar formally in the cover letters that were generated, but they were emphasizing different things, like you were saying. And I found that really interesting. At the elite schools, they were emphasizing critical thinking and, you know, obviously academics, they were emphasizing leadership in both. But I guess it was the emphasis on like creativity and critical thinking that was most interesting to me, especially because those things are in danger of becoming available only to the elites, especially in this AI moment, I think, you know, that's part of the responsibility of those teachers to critically engage with these things, is making sure that those capabilities are available to everyone, I think. So, interesting to hear again.